Welcome to another edition of Discover Marshalltown. Kyle Martin out and about, and we are in the field like we try to do every single time we tape this program. Paul Adams is with us today, and we're actually in an airplane hangar. And Paul, why don't you explain what EAA is, because that's why we're here. You may notice these planes behind us. What is EAA?
EAA stands for Experimental Aircraft Association. In the 1950s, there was a guy named Paul Poberezny that got together to form an organization because there's a few people around the U.S. that were building home builds, and he and his wife Audrey formed a little organization so they could share knowledge. Mm-hmm. And the outcropping of that is today's Experimental Aircraft Association, which is centered around home builds like the one standing behind us. But it's a lot more than that. EAA has grown into an organization that's international. It goes across 70 nations. It supports not only home building, but International Aerobatic Club, Warbirds of America, Antique Aircraft Association, and Rotorcraft, and a number of organizations like that. So it's morphed into a rather large organization. And one of the grassroots thing that carries EAA along throughout the day is chapters. And like in Marshalltown here, we have Chapter 675, and Chapter 675 has 40 members, and we meet once a month. And we have home belts, we have antiques, we have warbirds, we have helicopters, we have a hodgepodge of stuff in our chapter. And our chapter got started 40 some odd years ago as a home building chapter, just like the international organization. And we morphed into kind of guys in our 50s and 60s and 70s. We eat a lot, we talk airplanes a lot, and we fly a lot. So we have a lot of fun.
Tell me about Oshkosh, Wisconsin, because it seems to be a hotbed. I did a little research, and that kind of seems to be where it all started.
Yep, Oshkosh is Mecca for the Experimental Aircraft Association. And it's interesting that you bring that up because in less than 30 days, the EAA, they call it Air Adventure, is starting. Oshkosh is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That's where it gets its name. But the EAA's headquarters are in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And they have a large museum there, and also their staff is located there. Every end of July, 1st of August, they have Air Adventure. And Air Adventure, they have between 500,000 to 700,000 people show up. Wow. It is the world's busiest airport for a week, due to the number of landings and takeoffs. And what it's about people sharing their love of aviation. And again, it's home built. It got started as home built. But there's warbirds. For example, this year it's the year of the bomber. They're bringing bombers from all around the world, around the U.S., and they're going to fly them over the airport one time.
Neat.
You know, and that's kind of cool. They have an air show because the International Aerobatic Club's there, and every night they have an air show. I stay in Camp Scholar with 200,000-300,000 of my closest friends. I take my wife, my kids, my two sons grew up going to Oshkosh.
Neat.
And Camp Scholar is hard to explain. It's a city that's nothing there today. In about a month from now, these 200,000 people will be there. And for example, one year I went to an event during the Oshkosh event, and it was astronauts from NASA. And I walked back to my camper and I poked my wife and I says, guess who's camping next to us? An astronaut from NASA,
oh,
you know,
neat.
Something like that. And also there's around 20,000 show planes. People bring their home builds, people bring their warbirds, their helicopters, their antique classics, their whatever, and they put them on display. And also there's about 600 vendors where you can buy anything from a nice piece of jewelry to keep the wife coming back every year to an airplane part.
Paul, let me ask you personally, how did you get started in this, building these experimental aircraft or home-built aircraft. How did you personally start out?
Well, when I was a kid, I built model airplanes. So it just must have been in my DNA somewhere in there. I'd lock myself in my bedroom and build a model and go out and try to fly it and crash it. And so I got my crashing done over with early. And so I had that interest initially. After I left college, I had some GI Bill left. I was in the Air Force and I had that GI Bill, and I took the rest of that because I wanted to learn to fly. And I learned to fly over in Ames. And from that, a friend of mine took me to this crazy place called Oshkosh. And he laughs today. He says, "Paul, I've never spent so much of your money over these years because I have built 5 home builds. And but I went up there and I like using my hands. I'm a problem solver. I like something that a task that it causes me to think and work through the issues. And so home building was just a natural for me to enjoy my flying and my desire to build things. It's just a natural.
Yeah.
And most of us are that way that do this.
Where do you find parts to build airplanes? I typically think of as a plane coming already assembled. At least I hope so, some of the ones I'm flying on. Where would you go? Do you go to trade shows and find parts, or do you fabricate the parts yourself? Or?
Well, it depends. It depends on the part. The airplane behind me is what's called a plans-built airplane. So there was 13 drawings. So from the firewall back, those parts I made. And there's a few thousand of them.
Wow.
There's something like 10,000 parts in the wings. And I made them. Up there is a rib. You can see a rib. They can't see it on the camera, but that rib is an example of the rib that's in this wing. Mm-hmm. So I ordered the wood from California because it's a specialized aircraft wood, and just started making parts. And something unique here this last week, I needed a casting. So where does an airplane home builder get a casting? Well, I made a mold, a box, got some sand at Menards, and made a casting. So most of the parts on these things we build.
Wow.
We make from scratch. And another thing about Air Adventure I didn't mention, so where did I learn to do that? Mm-hmm. Well, I learned to do that in Wisconsin at Air Adventure at the air show. I took classes on fiberglassing, welding, gluing, stitching. You see all the stitches right here. That's a special stitch just for aircraft use, and I had to learn how to stitch. I had to learn how to fabric. I had to learn how to paint. And I learned all those skills either at Oshkosh or from members in the chapter. And you just build it over time. Mm-hmm. And now I teach people how to do this.
Wow. So, how long have you been doing this? You said, once you got out of the service, you started doing this. How long ago is that, Paul?
I started building airplanes in 1971.
Okay, so you've been doing it a while.
Yes.
So you'd be a guy I'd want to learn from if you've got that kind of expertise. That is amazing. So you said fiberglass. Are these airplanes made out of a combination of obviously a light metal, fiberglass, and what else?
Okay. This is a fiberglass part.
Okay.
This is a fiberglass part.
Okay.
Okay, to make that part, I had to make a mold. I went to the hobby shop, got some modeling clay, just like people that model stuff, put the modeling clay on there and made that part. The wing is wood with the Dacron fabric on it and specialized paint. The landing gear is aluminum. There's very little steel in this airplane. It's wood and fabric. So it just depends on the style of the airplane. I'm going to come off camera just a sec.
That's okay. That's all right.
Here's my first home built.
Yeah.
It was all fiberglass.
Okay, let's show that if we can. Why don't we hold that up here a little bit? We can zoom in. And that entire craft is fiberglass.
Yeah, that whole thing was fiberglass. And so what that was is, maybe you've seen this blue foam that they make boat docks out of.
Yep.
Okay, these wings are made out of blue foam that we carved with a hot wire, with a piece of wire stretched across two sticks and a train transformer sitting on the ground. We carved that, laid the fiberglass on it, and made a fiberglass airplane. This airplane is from the 1970s and 80s, and in EAA they call it fast glass. As I was telling them earlier, that's when I was skinny and had hair, and the only thing I wanted to do was go fast.
Yeah.
So this airplane on a little 70 horsepower engine would go 170 miles an hour.
Really?
So, and that was the thing back then. And but I've changed. Now I like low and slow and any kind of flying.
There you go.
So these airplanes are low and slow. This
Right.
airplane does 100 miles an hour.
Okay.
At best, I tend to fly it at 75.
Where would you take an aircraft like this? Anywhere you want?
You can take them just about anywhere that you want to. We are limited to fly. Like I can't fly over Des Moines,
Sure.
and there's certain airspaces that you're not allowed to fly in. But we can actually take these just about anywhere. We just might have to go around something.
Yeah, that is really neat. Now, as far as training is concerned, I'm guessing you're a licensed pilot, but does everybody have to be licensed to fly aircraft like this?
Yes.
Okay. So you are indeed, not only are you a chapter of experimental aircraft, but you are licensed pilots.
Yeah, there is a group called ultralight
Right.
pilots, and in ultralights you don't have to have a license. And those airplanes can only weigh 254 pounds, one passenger. And you talk about low and slow. This is the epitome of low and slow.
Yeah.
These airplanes that I fly now are called light sport aircraft, and it's a new license for pilots and a new license for licensing aircraft, where this can weigh up to 1,320 pounds, two passengers, single engine, fixed pitch prop, and can only fly 140 max and land around 40. And so that's something new. And so some of our chapter members are just getting light sport pilots,
Right.
where I'm actually, I got a whole litany of licenses just because I enjoyed the challenge, but I'm a full-fledged pilot.
Awesome.
They're just enjoying the bottom end right now.
We're going to take a break. You are listening to Discover Marshalltown. Paul Adams is our guest here. We're out at the Marshalltown Municipal Airport. We're going to be back with more right after this.
Wait. Put your seatbelt on. Oh.
Buckle up. Arrive alive.
Welcome back to Discover Marshalltown. Kyle Martin here. We're out at an airplane hangar. Paul Adams is with us, Experimental Aircraft Association. And let's talk about some of the service projects and some of the work that you do, Paul, because I noticed that you guys did some work on the jet out at the American Legion. You want to talk a little, is that an F4?
That's an F4.
Okay. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, how that occurred, Jeff Hayden, who is with the American Legion, came to our chapter one day and said, hey, the F4 really needs a facelift. Mm-hmm. And he says, there's nobody better out here in Marshalltown than people that build airplanes for a hobby. And he said, because of the activities on the F4 are basically cleaning and fixing and repairing and stuff like this. He did get a professional painter to paint it, but he came to us, and so we volunteered to go over there and scrape and fix and repair, and we had a blast. And the part about that I really enjoyed, the first day out there, because what the F4 is, it's a little remembrance of those that have fought for our freedoms. And the first day we were out there, the 5 EAA members that were working on it were all veterans. And that was pretty cool to me.
That is neat. That is neat. And we talked a little bit off camera about some of the restoration projects that you've been involved in with, some of the older aircraft, and sometimes you're making parts where there were none, and sometimes you're learning on the job as you go. But talk a little bit about, there's a photo on the wall of you and your son up in Oshkosh with a particular aircraft. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, what that is the Experimental Aircraft Association is all about flying airplanes. So they don't really like to have airplanes that just sit. So they have a B-25, which is a medium-range bomber from World War II that was donated to them, and it hasn't flown for 20 years. So what they did is they said, we need lots of man hours to get this thing back to flying status. And they said, well, where else can we go get man hours but at our EAA chapters? Because these guys build airplanes, they have the skill set to repair and restore a B-25. So they have what's called work parties. We go up on a Thursday, stay there Friday, Saturday, and come home Sunday. And we go up there and work 16 hours on Friday and Saturday. And what we do is EAA has certified mechanics that keep the airplanes flying and in good shape. Those certified mechanics, when we walk in, come up to me or whoever, and they say, Paul, here's your job for today. And for example, the last job I did, the crew access door didn't work. And they said, Paul, go fix the crew access door. So I went over there and looked at the crew access door. There was a broken part and some bad rivets. I removed the crew access door, made some new parts, re-riveted everything back together. And today the crew access door works. And it made me feel good. Because the mechanic came up later and said, Paul, that door hadn't worked for 20 years. Thank you.
Awesome.
So that, that was pretty cool in my aspect. But we've wired, we've removed wings, I built the navigator seat one time, just a myriad of jobs. But we're overseen. A certified mechanic has to sign all this off, so they watch us.
Tell me about the Young Eagles for young folks that want to get involved.
Young Eagles is a pretty cool project. It got started many years ago, and one of the issues in the aviation world is the number of pilots is declining. And today's youth don't have the opportunities to walk out to an airport the way I did. And when I was a kid, I got on my bicycle and rode out to the airport. And not as much of that happens today. So EAA recognized this, and they said, what we want to do is we have this large flying community out there, and we want to introduce flight to young people. And so they started this, and today they have flown over 2 million Young Eagles. If you fly as a Young Eagle, not only do you get the flight, they will give you your next lesson free. They will give you a free gown school. You have the opportunity for 2 $1,500 scholarships and more. So there's not just a flight, there's other activities. And to me, the coolest story in Marshalltown area about that is Steve Albrecht, the airport manager. He was a Young Eagle from from our local chapter here.
I did not know that. I just interviewed Steve not too long ago.
Yeah,
That's neat.
He's one of our successes.
Wow, yeah, and Steve is a flyer as well. So that's awesome. The thing that kind of strikes me about these and about you is obviously nobody's going to know your airplane better than you because you built it.
Right.
Right. I mean, you are literally going to know it from the ground up. You're going to know everything in that airplane. So not only you're flying it, but you built the craft. So maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is a poor comparison. I always tend to drive other people's cars maybe a little faster and I don't take as good a care of it as I would my own. Well, you're probably taking pretty good care of these, right?
Right. Well, Craig asked me an interesting question a while ago. Well, who maintains these?
Yeah.
Well, an interesting thing about when you build a home-built aircraft, you have to have it inspected by the FAA. Mm-hmm. They'll come, and one of the things they do after the inspection, they give you a little piece of paper, and I am the certified mechanic for each one of these. So not only do I have a pilot's license, but I have a repairman certificate to do all the work, maintenance and work on this airplane. And I get one for each airplane that I built. So I have 5 of those, or 4, getting ready to get my 5th one because I have one just about to be certified.
So out here at our local airport, how many are in the hangars? There are many hangars out here. People, if you don't come out, if you haven't been out to the airport in a while, you'd be surprised at the amount of hangar space. But how many experimental aircrafts are out here?
We have close to 20 experimental aircraft out here. And we also have some antique classics, and we have some certified aircraft in our chapter out here. So a lot of people really get amazed how many home builds we have on this little airport.
Right.
And they're all different. What's fun is if it's a nice evening and we got all our hangar doors, come on out and take a look at it. We love to have people look at them because there's various kinds, all different colors, all different sizes. Each one is a unique thing. Plus, we help with flight breakfast with the Kiwanis group here in September, October, and we bring them all out then. So come out and you can see them then also.
I was going to ask you about some of the fly-in, drive-in, pancake flight breakfasts that are so popular at some of the smaller airports here in the upper Midwest. Do you do some of those? Do you do some of those throughout the upper Midwest?
Yeah, there's probably a couple answers to that. We call them the $50 pancakes. You know, you get in your airplane and you load some gasoline in there and burn a whole bunch of gas, turn that gas to noise, land at the airport, and get your free pancakes, get back in, fly back home. And that has been a tradition. We've got a guy in our chapter, Harry Dirks, and I asked him one time, Harry's like close to 90. I said, when's the first flight breakfast you ever go to? And he said, 50 years ago. So they've been around. It's a tradition here in the Midwest for years. So we do that. But also in our flying group, in our EAA chapter, we have a subgroup. We call ourselves the Fogs, Flying Old Geezers, and every Thursday we get together and a gaggle of airplanes from Marshalltown, some from Newton, some from Grinnell, some from Iowa, from Farmers Fields where they have their own landing strip. We'll fly somewhere and eat a bunch of pancakes and chit-chat and fly home.
Well, you're going to laugh when I tell you this. I went to your Facebook page before we filmed this today, and I kept seeing FOGZ. And I'm like, so I Googled FOGZ. There is no explanation for it, but now I know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know where the term came from, except maybe when somebody was looking at us out eating one day, and they went, golly, you guys are all old and looking like a bunch of geezers, and you fly, huh?
Yeah, I could not figure out. I kept seeing it multiple times. FOGZ meets at, you'd have a time and a place, and I'm like, what is that? I've got to know it before I interview you.
Yeah, no, and that's not unusual about this chapter. The Waterloo chapter, EAA chapter, they get together, they fly all over the place eating. You know?
Yeah, that's neat.
I think EAAers are good eaters.
Well, it looked like you guys have a lot of fun, a lot of social gathering.
Yeah, we in our summer months, we're out here at the airport having barbecues and potlucks and ice cream socials and stuff like that. In the winter, we meet at the Fisher Community Center and have technical talks and not so much technical on how to build, but maybe a guy from the Navy come in and talk about flying in the Navy, or we got a U-2 pilot in our chapter, and he'll come and talk about that. And,
well, that's neat.
And stuff like that. So it depends on what time of year what we do.
Sure. In regards to some of the airplanes here, I noticed that they're obviously in stature, they're a little bit smaller. Is that typical that, if we went to an airport, we'd see, passenger airplanes a little bit bigger than this, but when you build it yourself, are they a little bit smaller?
Yeah.
Or do you not like that term?
No.
I don't want to offend you.
No, it's a really interesting question, because what you see in our chapter is small light sport airplane primarily. Okay, but I give a lot of presentations at Kiwanis groups and rotor groups, stuff like this, and they ask me, well, Paul, what kind of variation do you have in home builds? When I tell them that there's a home built that exceeds the speed of sound, we get a little drop in the jaw,
Right.
Or when I tell them, there's 8 and 10 passenger home builds. The home build is just a concept. In fact, that it isn't a certified airplane. You build it in your garage or your hangar, but there are all kinds of different home builds. You just happen to see this smaller one because we're Fogs. We're flying old geezers.
That is, yeah. I mean, and I hope that we can get some video footage of the photographs on the wall. There are all kinds of different, and in fact, I wrote down some of the. I wrote down ultralights, light sport aircraft, warbirds, vintage aircraft, and aerobatics. So those are just some of the categories of the aircraft that you guys build.
Yeah. For example, when I was young and my younger days, my son and I competed in competition aerobatics. We had a lot of fun, a father-son thing, and a lot of people think, you mean you let your son do whifferdillies in the world, and throw this thing upside down? And I says, yeah, I wish I was half as good as he was.
Really?
Yeah, so, but that's another way of enjoying the sport and the hobby.
With the open cockpits, do you wear parachute? Maybe you've been asked that. Maybe you're looking at me like, heck no, I'm a daredevil.
No, you know, some people on their first flight, because we're also the test pilot,
Yeah.
you know, and some people on their first flights will wear a parachute. We had to wear parachutes in competition aerobatics. That was a rule. But no, I don't wear a parachute. A lot of people say, well, that first flight, well, that first flight is not just a first flight. We taxi, it is a stepping stone process. And if we didn't think the airplane would fly right, we wouldn't fly it.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a lot of tests that we do before that. And quite honestly, most first flights are a little melodramatic. You know, I went up, I came down, it flew.
I'm glad it worked. Kiss the ground, amen.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, we're about out of time. Paul Adams has been our guest today, talking about the Experimental Aircraft Association, and it's been a lot of fun. It's neat seeing not only the photographs, but the airplanes themselves. Thank you for telling us about this.
Thank you for asking. We would love to share it.
Oh, it's been great. That's going to wrap up Discover Marshalltown. Tune in again next time.